The moment Thelma Gardner stepped into Golden Dragon Karate Academy, leaning on her cane, the laughter began. Students exchanged knowing glances as the elderly black woman fumbled with her oversized gi, struggling to tie the white belt around her waist. Sensei Rick watched with barely concealed impatience while Tyler and Josh, the dojo's alpha males, staged a cruel imitation of her movements. None of them bothered to look closely at her eyes, calm, observant, missing nothing. None thought to question why her mistakes were so precisely inconsistent. They saw only what they expected, a confused old woman out of her depth, not the legendary Thunderhand who once dominated Japan's most elite tournaments. Their mockery would continue for weeks, each snicker and side-eye unknowingly pulling at threads that, when finally unraveled, would expose the formidable master hiding in plain sight. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the strip mall parking lot as Thelma Gardner stepped carefully from her weathered Buick. At 72, she moved with the deliberate precision of someone who had learned to respect her body's limitations. A floral cardigan draped over her shoulders, and a wooden cane supported her right side. Despite the slight tremor in her hands, her eyes remained sharp, taking in every detail of the storefront before her. Golden Dragon Karate Academy read the red and gold sign, complete with a dragon silhouette frozen mid-strike. Thelma adjusted her glasses and straightened her back before pushing open the glass door. The reception area smelled of sweat and disinfectant. A young woman with perfectly straightened blonde hair looked up from her phone, her expression shifting from boredom to confusion as she took in Thelma's appearance. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her tone suggesting she doubted she could. Thelma offered a warm smile. "Yes, dear. I was hoping to observe a class today. I've been thinking about taking up martial arts." The receptionist, her nameplate read Amanda, blinked twice before responding. "You want to take karate?" She glanced at Thelma's cane, then back to her face. "That's right." Thelma's voice was soft but firm. "Is that possible?" Amanda seemed to struggle with a response. Let me check with the manager. You can have a seat if you'd like." Thelma nodded and lowered herself onto a bench along the wall. Through the large viewing window, she could see a class in progress. About 15 students, mostly teenagers and young adults, moved in synchronized patterns across the polished wood floor. They shouted with each punch and kick, their white uniforms snapping with each movement. At the front stood a man in his 40s with a black belt wrapped around his waist. His salt and pepper hair was cropped close to his scalp, and his voice carried throughout the room as he barked commands. "Again, stronger, feel the power in your core." Sensei Rick Walker paced the front of the class, his eyes scanning each student critically. Thelma watched with quiet intensity, her hands folded over her cane. The class continued for another 20 minutes before Rick clapped his hands together. Line, up, bow. The students formed neat rows, bowed in unison, then broke into casual conversation as they began collecting their belongings. Thelma rose slowly and made her way to the entrance of the training floor. Rick was wiping his brow with a small towel when he noticed her standing there. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his professional smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I hope so," Thelma replied. "I'm interested in joining your beginner's class." Before Rick could respond, a stocky young man with closely cropped blonde hair snickered loudly behind her. "Ma'am, the bingo hall is that way." He pointed toward the far end of the strip mall, where a community center hosted various senior activities. Several other students laughed, including a tall, athletic young man who seemed to be the blonde boy's friend. Rick's smile faltered. "Tyler," he said, his tone carrying a half-hearted warning. Tyler shrugged, grabbing his gym bag. "Just trying to help her find the right place, Sensei." Rick turned back to Thelma, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, our program is pretty physically demanding. I'm not sure it would be appropriate for someone of your age?" Thelma finished for him, her smile never wavering. "Well, yes," Rick admitted. We have insurance considerations, and the risk of injury. Rick. A sharp voice cut through the conversation. A woman in her 30s with dark hair pulled into a severe bun approached from the office. I'm Erica Matthews, business manager for Golden Dragon. She extended her hand to Thelma. Is there something we can help you with? Thelma shook her hand firmly. Thelma Gardner. I'm interested in joining your beginner's karate class. Erica's professional smile remained fixed, but her eyes betrayed her skepticism. Ms. Gardner, while we appreciate your interest, I think Rick is right to be concerned. Our program is designed for people with different physical capabilities. I understand your concern, Thelma said, but I'm not looking to compete in tournaments. I'm simply looking for some light fitness and discipline. I think karate could provide that for me. Erica glanced at Rick, then back to Thelma. Well, our policy is inclusivity, of course, she said, lowering her voice. But we have to consider liability issues. Perhaps Tai Chi would be more appropriate? The community center offers. I specifically want to learn karate, Thelma insisted. Gently. If it doesn't work out, I'll be the first to admit it. Rick and Erica exchanged looks. Thelma couldn't help but notice the silent communication between them. Erica's slight nod, Rick's reluctant sigh. We could use the enrollment, Erica whispered, just loud enough for Thelma to hear. And it would look good for our community outreach. Rick rubbed the back of his neck. Fine. We can start you with a trial period. The beginner class meets Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4. Uniform rental is included in your first month. Thank you, Thelma said, her smile genuine. I appreciate the opportunity. Amanda will get you set up with the paperwork, Erica said, already turning back toward her office. Rick, we need to discuss the weekend tournament. As Rick followed Erica, Thelma made her way back to the reception area. She could feel the stares of the lingering students, could hear their whispers. She kept her head high. 20 minutes later, with paperwork completed and payment processed, Amanda handed Thelma a folded white uniform. This is the smallest adult GI we have, she said. The locker room is through there if you want to try it. On. Thelma thanked her and made her way to the women's locker room. Inside, she found a young woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail, changing out of her GI. The girl looked up, surprised to see Thelma. Hello? Thelma said warmly. I'm new. Here. Oh. Hi. The girl seemed unsure how to respond. I'm Mia. Thelma Gardner. Pleased to meet you. Mia nodded awkwardly and continued gathering her things. Thelma found a bench and carefully unfolded the white uniform. It was clearly several sizes too large, but it would have to do. She slipped it on over her clothes, struggling somewhat with the stiff fabric. The white belt proved particularly challenging as she tried to remember the proper way to tie it from watching the other students. When she emerged from the locker room, several students from the previous class were still lingering. Tyler and his tall friend were among them, and they made no effort to hide their amusement at Thelma's appearance. Check it out, Josh, Tyler said loudly. Grandma's ready for battle. Josh, the taller boy, laughed. The belt's not even right. It's upside down or something. Thelma approached Rick, who was setting up for the next class. Is this correct? She asked, gesturing to her belt. Rick glanced at her, then quickly adjusted the belt. There you go. Let's have you join today's class since you're already here. Just follow along as best you can. The beginner's class was smaller than the advanced one Thelma had observed earlier. Most of the students were teenagers or young adults, with a few in their 30s. Thelma was by far the oldest person in the room. Rick positioned her in the back row. Basic stances today, he announced to the class. We'll start with front stance. Thelma watched carefully as Rick demonstrated, then attempted to mimic his position. Her knees protested as she tried to bend into the stance and her balance wavered. She had to use her cane to stabilize herself several times. No canes on the training floor, Rick called out. If you need it, maybe this isn't the right activity for you. Thelma nodded, setting her cane against the wall. She wobbled back to her position, moving more slowly now. As the class progressed through various stances and basic punches, Thelma struggled visibly. Her movements were stiff and awkward, her timing consistently off. When they practiced simple blocks, she seemed to forget the sequences, dropping into wrong stances or moving in the opposite direction from everyone else. She could hear the snickers, could feel the side eyes from both students and instructor. But she persisted, her face a mask of concentration. After class, as students filtered out, Thelma approached Rick. Despite the humiliation she had endured, she bowed deeply to him, showing proper dojo etiquette. "Thank you, Sensei," she said. "I look forward to improving." Rick seemed taken aback by her formality and composure. "Right, well, see you Wednesday then." In the locker room, Thelma could hear Tyler and Josh in the adjacent men's room, their voices carrying through the thin wall. "Did you see her trying to do the horse stance?" Tyler's voice mocked. "Like a newborn giraffe." Josh's deeper voice followed with a high-pitched imitation. "Thank you, Sensei. Like she's in some old kung fu movie." Mia's voice cut in, quieter but clear. "Come on, guys. That's enough." "What, you're defending her now?" Tyler challenged. "She doesn't belong here, and you know it." "Whatever," Mia responded. "I've got to go." Thelma changed quietly, folding the GI neatly before returning it to Amanda at the front desk. She walked to her car with dignity, her cane tapping a steady rhythm on the asphalt. The drive home was silent, no radio, no distractions, just the steady hum of the engine and the weight of the day's events. Thelma's apartment was in a modest building on the quieter side of town. The one-bedroom unit was neat and sparsely decorated, with furniture that had seen better days but was well-maintained. Photos lined a small bookshelf, Thelma in her youth, a handsome man with his arm around her, the two of them in front of various landmarks around the world. She moved through the space with practiced familiarity, preparing a simple dinner and eating it at her small kitchen table. Afterward, she walked to the bedroom closet and pulled out a carved wooden box from the top shelf. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Thelma opened the box carefully. Inside lay a faded black belt, the fabric worn but the color still deep. Next to it was a weathered photograph, the colors muted with age. In it, a younger Thelma stood proudly among a group of men in martial arts uniforms, all bearing black belts. Behind them hung a Japanese flag. Thelma traced her fingers over the faces. In the photo, lingering on her own youthful image, her expression was solemn, her posture perfect, her eyes filled with a fire that still flickered, however faintly, in her aged face. She closed the box without a word, returned it to its place, and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would be another day, another chance to remember who she once was, and perhaps who she might become again. 2 days later, Thelma returned to Golden Dragon Karate Academy for her second class. She arrived early, her GI neatly folded in a canvas bag, her face composed despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. The memory of the snickers and side eyes from her first class lingered, but so did her determination. Amanda barely looked, up as Thelma entered. "They're starting in 15 minutes, she said, gesturing toward the locker room. Thelma changed quickly, managing the belt with slightly more confidence this time. When she emerged onto the training floor, a few students were already warming up, including Mia, who offered a hesitant smile. "Hello again," Thelma said, approaching the young woman. "Mia, right?" Mia nodded. "Yes. How are you feeling after Monday's class?" "First sessions can be rough. A bit sore," Thelma admitted with a chuckle. "But nothing that won't heal." She noticed Mia struggling with her stance as she practiced a basic front kick. The girl's balance was off, her weight distributed incorrectly. "May I?" Thelma asked gently. Mia looked uncertain but nodded. "Try placing your foot here," Thelma suggested, pointing to a spot slightly to the left of where Mia had positioned herself. "And remember to breathe. The power comes from here." She lightly touched Mia's diaphragm. "Not from your legs." Mia adjusted her stance, took a deep breath, and executed the kick again. This time her balance held steady, and the kick had more force behind it. That's better," Mia said, surprised. "Thanks." Before Thelma could respond, Rick called, the class to order. They lined up, bowed, and began the session with basic punching drills. Thelma moved slowly but with more coordination than she had shown in the first class, though she still appeared to struggle with certain movements. Halfway through the class, Rick paired students for light contact sparring. Thelma found herself without a partner until Josh stepped forward, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'll work with the new lady," he announced loudly. Rick looked uncertain. "Be careful, Josh. Light contact only." "Of course, Sensei." Josh's tone was innocent, but his eyes gleamed with mischief. Tyler, watching from nearby, gave Josh a thumbs up. The pairs spread out across the floor. Josh squared off against Thelma, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. Thelma stood in a basic stance, her guard up, but her posture stiff and awkward. "Ready, Grandma?" Josh asked, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Thelma nodded. "Ready." Josh threw a light jab, clearly pulling his punch. Thelma attempted to step aside but moved too slowly. The punch grazed her shoulder. She tried to counter with a basic block and punch combination, but her timing was off, her movements clumsy. "Come on," Josh taunted. "Even my little sister hits harder than that." He threw another punch, this one a bit faster. Thelma shuffled awkwardly to the side, nearly losing her balance. Josh followed with a light kick that tapped her hip, causing her to stumble backward. Several students had stopped their own sparring to watch, including Tyler, who was openly laughing now. "Josh," Rick called from across the room, his tone carrying a warning. "Keep it appropriate." "Just teaching the basics, Sensei," Josh replied innocently. He continued to dance around Thelma, throwing controlled strikes that she either blocked poorly or failed to avoid entirely. Each time she stumbled or winced, Tyler and a few others would snicker. Mia watched with a frown, her own sparring partner forgotten. Rick finally approached and ended the session. "That's enough sparring for today," he announced. "Let's move on to kata practice." As the class reformed into lines, Thelma caught her breath, her face flushed from exertion but her eyes calm. Josh returned to Tyler's side, both of them mimicking her movements and laughing. "Dude, did you see her face when you got her with that roundhouse?" Tyler whispered, a little too loudly. Mia shot them a disapproving look, but said nothing. After class, Thelma thanked Rick once again with a formal bow. He acknowledged her with a nod, though his expression remained neutral, betraying neither approval nor disdain. The following day, Mia found herself at the public library after school, researching karate history for a social studies project. She browsed through the sports section, pulling out books on martial arts from different eras. As she flipped through a book on American martial arts pioneers, a name caught her eye: Thelma Gardner. Curious, she read the brief paragraph. Among the few American women to train in Japan during the early 1970s, Thelma Gardner, pictured below with the Tanaka School champions, earned the respect of traditionalists through her dedication and natural talent. Her competitive career was cut short after the controversial Tokyo Open of 1974, where the paragraph ended there, continuing on the next page, which had been torn out. The referenced photo was missing as well. Mia stared at the text, her mind racing. Could this be the same Thelma? The elderly woman fumbling through basic stances at Golden Dragon? She checked out the book and spent the evening searching online for more information, but found little beyond a few mentions in archived martial arts forums, references to Thunderhand Gardner and the Tokyo scandal. That evening, in her modest apartment, Thelma stood before her bathroom mirror, her nightgown partially lifted to reveal a long, jagged scar that ran across her abdomen. The tissue was puckered and pale against her dark skin, a permanent reminder of violence endured long ago. She traced the scar with her fingertips, her expression solemn. Then she closed her eyes and performed a breathing exercise, slow, deliberate inhales and exhales that gradually deepened, her body relaxing with each breath. Across town, an elderly Japanese man in an impeccably tailored gray suit sat in a rental car, parked with a clear view of Golden Dragon Karate Academy. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture perfect even in the confines of the vehicle. On the passenger seat lay a file folder containing newspaper clippings, photographs, and what appeared to be official documents, all featuring Thelma Gardner in her younger years. The man checked his watch, then started the car and drove away, his face impassive but his eyes alert, missing nothing. The next day's class at Golden Dragon was more crowded than usual. A promotional event had brought in several potential new students, and Rick was in full performance mode, demonstrating flashy kicks and breaks for the audience. Thelma arrived in her now familiar too large GI, taking her place at the back of the class. She noticed immediately that something had changed in the dynamics of the dojo. Students who had previously ignored her now whispered as she passed. Josh and Tyler were huddled together, occasionally glancing her way and snickering. Rick seemed distracted during the warm-up, his instructions less precise than usual. Several times he had to correct himself after giving contradictory commands. Front stance, no, horse stance, focus people. As the class moved through basic drills, Thelma noticed a disturbing pattern. Several students, particularly those in Tyler and Josh's circle, were subtly mimicking her movements, exaggerating her stiffness, her occasional balance issues, her careful pace. Rick grew increasingly frustrated as he lost control of the class. "This is a karate dojo, not a comedy club," he snapped after catching two younger students imitating Thelma's bow. During a water break, Mia approached Thelma. "Don't mind them," she said quietly. "They're just immature." Josh, overhearing, stepped closer. "What was that, Mia? Taking Grandma's side now?" Mia straightened her spine. "Her name is Ms. Gardner, and yes, I am. You guys need to back off." Tyler joined them, towering over Mia. "You might want to remember who your friends are. And you might want to remember basic respect," Mia countered, her voice stronger than she felt. Josh leaned in, his voice low. "Keep interfering, and I'll remind you of your place. Got it?" Mia stepped back, her confidence faltering under his glare. Thelma watched the exchange silently, her eyes missing nothing. After class, Rick was approached by Erica, who had been observing, from her office window. "We need to talk," she said, her tone clipped. "The new reviews are coming in." Rick followed her into the office where she showed him a tablet displaying recent online ratings for the dojo. "Trendy but directionless," she read aloud. "Instructors allow bullying, more focused on image than discipline. This is not what we want associated with our brand, Rick." Rick ran a hand through his hair. "It's been a tough month. We lost 3 advanced students to that new MMA gym across town, and the tournament results weren't great. And now we have disruptions in class," Erica added pointedly. "Your newest student is becoming a liability." "You're the one who pushed for inclusivity," Rick reminded her. "Inclusivity is good for the brand. Disruption is not." Erica closed the tablet cover with a snap. "Fix it." Later that afternoon, a few beginner students stayed for additional practice. Thelma was among them, working on a basic kata in the corner of the dojo. A young boy of about 12 was struggling with a sequence nearby, his frustration evident in his increasingly sloppy movements. After watching for a moment, Thelma approached him. "May I offer a suggestion?" The boy looked at her uncertainly but nodded. "Your weight is shifting too early," she explained, demonstrating the correct foot placement. "Feel your connection to the ground first, then move." The boy tried again, following her guidance. His execution was immediately cleaner, more stable. "That's it," Thelma encouraged. "Much better." Rick, who had been observing from across the room, walked over. "That's a pretty precise correction for someone who just started karate," he said, his tone questioning. Thelma smiled mildly. "Old habits die hard, I suppose." "What does that mean exactly?" Rick pressed. Thelma's expression revealed nothing. "Simply that good posture and balance are universal principles. I may be new to karate, but I've lived in this body for 72 years. You learn a thing or two." Rick seemed unsatisfied with her answer, but was called away to assist another student. Thelma returned to her kata practice, her movements deliberately, unrefined, but her eyes sharp and aware. That evening, as darkness fell over the city, Thelma sat alone in her living room, a cup of tea cooling on the table beside her. The telephone rang, breaking the silence. She answered it on the third ring. Moshi moshi, she said, the Japanese greeting flowing naturally from her lips. The voice that responded was male, elderly, speaking in rapid Japanese. Thelma listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each word. Hi, she replied finally. Wakata. Yes. I understand. She hung up, sat motionless for several long moments, then rose and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights cast pools of yellow light on the empty sidewalk. In the distance, a car engine started, then faded away. They're watching, the voice had said. Are you ready to stop pretending? Thelma stared into the darkness, her reflection in the window glass revealing the face of a woman who had carried secrets for decades, and who now stood at the crossroads of revelation. The past, it seemed, had finally caught up with her. The morning light filtered through the windows of Golden Dragon as students filed in for the Monday class. Thelma arrived early, her movements more confident as she changed into her GI and tied her white belt. The past week had established a routine, though hardly a comfortable one. Rick was demonstrating a new sparring drill, having students form a circle while two participants practiced in the center. Remember, control is key, he emphasized. This isn't about hurting your partner, it's about technique. When Thelma's turn came, she stepped into the circle opposite a younger woman named Sarah. As they bowed to each other, Josh extended his foot just enough to catch Thelma's heel. She stumbled, forward, nearly falling flat before catching herself. Sorry, Josh said with exaggerated innocence. Total accident. Tyler snickered from across the circle, exchanging a fist bump with Josh when Rick wasn't looking. Thelma straightened herself, brushed off her GI, and looked directly at Josh. Instead of anger or embarrassment, she simply chuckled, a warm, knowing sound that somehow made Josh shift uncomfortably. No harm done, she said, turning back to her sparring partner. The session continued without further incident, but the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Josh's prank hadn't produced the humiliation he'd expected, and Thelma's reaction left him unsettled, rather than satisfied. After class, as students gathered their belongings, Mia approached Josh by the water fountain. That was a real jerk move, she said loudly enough for nearby students to hear. Josh turned, water dripping from his chin. What's your problem? My problem is watching you act like a bully to someone who's done nothing to you. Mia crossed her arms. She deserves the same respect as anyone else here. Tyler joined them, towering over Mia. Since when are you the dojo police? Since when is basic human decency optional? Mia shot back. A small crowd had formed, watching the confrontation with interest. Rick noticed the gathering from across the room but made no move to intervene, instead busying himself with straightening equipment. Josh leaned closer to Mia. You know what? You're right. Next time, I'll make sure to trip her harder. Maybe she'll finally get the message that she doesn't belong here. That's enough. The voice came from behind them. Thelma, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. Mia, thank you for your concern, but I can handle myself. She turned to Josh and Tyler. Young men, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for in your training. Clearly, it's not peace of mind. With that, she walked away, leaving Josh red-faced and Tyler unusually quiet. That night, the city park was empty, save for a few late joggers and a homeless man dozing on a distant bench. The moon cast silver light across the open grass where a solitary figure moved in the shadows of an ancient oak tree. Thelma, dressed in loose black pants and a fitted tank top, flowed through movements that bore no resemblance to the awkward fumbling she displayed at Golden Dragon. Her kata was precise, elegant, a perfect synthesis of power and grace. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground as she executed complex turns, her arms cutting through the air with controlled force. In these movements, decades fell away. There was no tremor in her hands, no stiffness in her joints. Each technique flowed seamlessly into the next, her breathing deep and measured, her focus absolute. Hidden behind a cluster of rhododendrons, Mia watched in astonishment. She had come to the park to run off her frustration after the confrontation with Josh, never expecting to encounter her elderly classmate, especially not like this. She remained motionless, afraid that any movement would break the spell of the moment. As Thelma completed her kata, she paused, centering herself with a deep breath. Then, to Mia's horror, she turned and looked directly at the bushes where Mia was hiding. "You can come out now," Thelma called softly. "The mosquitoes will eat you, alive in there." Mia emerged sheepishly, brushing leaves from her running shorts. "I'm sorry. I wasn't spying, I just—" "Yes, you were," Thelma said, but there was no anger in her voice. "And that's all right. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses." "That was—" Mia struggled for words. "That wasn't what you show in class." "No," Thelma agreed. "It wasn't." "Why?" Mia asked. "Why pretend you can barely do a front stance when you can move like that?" Thelma sat on a nearby bench, gesturing for Mia to join her. "Some questions are better left unanswered, at least for now." "I found something," Mia said after a moment of silence. "At the library. A book about martial arts history. It mentioned someone named Thelma Gardner who trained in Japan in the 70s. That's you, isn't it?" Thelma's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or caution. "The past is complicated, Mia. Sometimes it's best to let it die." "But—" "It's late," Thelma interrupted gently. "You should get home. Your parents will worry." As if to emphasize her point, she rose and collected her small bag from beneath the tree. "Whatever you think you saw tonight, I'd appreciate if you kept it to yourself." Mia nodded slowly, knowing she'd witnessed something extraordinary but unsure what to make of it. As Thelma walked away, her posture once again adopted the slight stoop she maintained at the dojo, a mask slipping back into place. The images from the park haunted Mia's dreams that night, intermingling with fragments from an old memory, a documentary she'd watched years ago about martial arts legends. In her dream, a younger Thelma stood victorious in a tournament ring, her hand raised by a referee, while a defeated opponent bowed in respect. Tokyo, 1972. The underground circuit was thriving. Unregistered matches held in warehouses and basements, away from the sanctioned tournaments with their rules and limitations. These were the fights that built reputations, where legends were born and broken. Thelma Gardner, 20 years old and fearless, faced her opponent across the chalk circle. He was Japanese, at least 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier, with a reputation for breaking bones. The crowd, mostly men, mostly betting against her, watched with anticipation as she assumed her stance. "The American girl will fall in 30 seconds, someone called in Japanese. "The American girl understands you," Thelma replied in perfect Japanese, her eyes never leaving her opponent. When the signal came, the man attacked with devastating speed. Thelma didn't retreat. She stepped into his assault, redirecting his energy and finding the spaces between his techniques. Her counterstrike was precise, a single palm heel to the sternum that sent him staggering backward. The crowd fell silent as the match continued, their shock growing as this foreign woman systematically dismantled their champion. Her final technique was a sweep followed by a perfectly placed strike that stopped just short of her opponent's throat. "Thunderhand!" someone shouted, and the nickname spread through the crowd like wildfire. The memory dream faded as Mia's alarm blared, pulling her back to the present. At Golden Dragon later that day, the usual dynamics were in play. Tyler was showing off for a group of younger students, demonstrating flashy kicks that looked impressive, but lacked proper foundation. Josh was in the corner, his face unusually serious as he worked through a kata with mechanical precision. Erica emerged from her office just as Rick was preparing to start class. "Rick, a word?" she called, beckoning him over. Their conversation was hushed but intense. Mia, filling her water bottle nearby, caught fragments. "Found in his locker? A tournament rules. Handle it quietly." When they separated, Erica's face was flushed with anger, while Rick looked troubled. Tyler was called into the office moments later, emerging pale and shaken. Class proceeded normally, with Thelma once again playing her role as the struggling elderly student. Mia watched her with new eyes, noticing the subtle control behind each mistake, the precision with which Thelma maintained her charade. After class, Josh approached Thelma as she was gathering her things. "I wanted to apologize," he said stiffly. "For yesterday, the trip. It was stupid." Thelma regarded him thoughtfully. "Apology accepted. But I'm curious, why the change of heart?" Josh glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "My dad saw you yesterday. Your father? Alan Wilson. He used to fight MMA before it was mainstream. He never made it big, but he knows his stuff." Josh's words came out in a rush. "He was picking me up and saw you walking to your car. He said you move, like someone who's trained for decades, that your posture and awareness aren't things that can be faked." Thelma's expression remained neutral. "Your father sounds observant. He's also a complete jerk who thinks I'll never amount to anything," Josh added bitterly. "Last night he spent an hour telling me how pathetic my form is compared to some old lady at my dojo." Understanding dawned in Thelma's eyes. "Ah, so your apology is—" "Not because of what he said," Josh insisted quickly. "It's because, I don't know, maybe I don't want to be like him." Before Thelma could respond, the front door opened and an elderly Japanese man in an immaculate suit entered the dojo. The receptionist looked up, startled by his formal appearance. "I help you?" she asked. "I am here to observe," the man replied, his English precise but heavily accented. Rick emerged from the back, his eyebrows rising at the sight of the visitor. "Are you with the local newspaper? We've been expecting someone to cover our upcoming tournament." The man bowed slightly. "I am Kenji Tanaka. I am here for personal interest." At the sound of his name, Thelma froze. She was partially hidden behind a display case of trophies, but her eyes locked with Kenji's across the room. A moment of silent recognition passed between them. Rick, oblivious to the exchange, guided Kenji to a seat along the wall. "Well, you're welcome to watch. We have an advanced class starting in 15 minutes. Thelma slipped out the side door, but Kenji followed shortly after, catching up to her in the parking lot. "Thelma-san," he said softly. She turned, her posture straightening subtly. "Kenji-san, it's been a long time." 41 years, 7 months, he confirmed. "Since Tokyo," a shadow crossed Thelma's face. "Why are you here?" "People will learn who you are," Kenji said, his voice low and urgent. "Are you ready for the consequences?" Thelma looked back at the dojo, then to the horizon beyond. "I'm done running from ghosts, Kenji. They find you anyway." Inside the dojo, Mia was preparing for the advanced class when she spotted Thelma and the Japanese visitor talking in the parking lot. Their body language suggested an old acquaintance, formal but familiar. After class, Mia approached Thelma. As she was leaving, "Ms. Gardner," she called, "I need to talk to you." Thelma paused, her expression guarded. "Yes, Mia?" Mia pulled the library book from her backpack, opening it to the page about American martial artists in Japan. "This is you, isn't it?" The paragraph mentions the Tokyo Open of 1974, but the next page was torn out. "What happened there? And who's the man you were talking to earlier?" Thelma gently closed the book. "Some doors are better left shut, Mia. But why are you pretending? You're clearly a master, not a beginner. I saw you in the park. You move like water." Thelma's eyes softened. "Let the past die," she said, but her tone was kind rather than dismissive. "Focus on your own journey." As Mia watched Thelma walk away, she felt a presence behind her. It was Josh, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. "What was that about?" he asked. Mia hesitated, then decided to trust her instinct. "I think there's more to Ms. Gardner than she's letting on." Josh nodded slowly. "My dad said something similar. He mentioned an old martial arts documentary he watched years ago. Something about American pioneers in Japan. He said her movement patterns are identical to footage he saw." They stood in silence. For a moment, two unlikely allies united by a growing mystery. Across town, in the administrative office of Golden Dragon, Erica sat alone reviewing security camera footage. On her screen, Tyler could be seen opening his locker, removing a small bottle of pills and quickly pocketing them before looking around nervously. Erica paused the footage, then deleted the file. She picked up her phone and dialed. "We need to talk about the tournament," she said when the call connected. "We have a situation that could damage the brand." The next morning, a notice appeared on the dojo bulletin board. "Attention all students, Challenge Day. This Friday, 6 p.m. Showcase your skills against fellow students and instructors. Friends and family welcome special demonstration matches to be." Announced at the bottom in Erica's neat handwriting, a note had been added. Featuring confidence-building exercise, Sensei Rick versus Ms. Gardner. When Tyler saw it, he laughed out loud. "Oh man, this is going to be epic. The old lady's going to get demolished." Nearby, Thelma read the announcement with a calm expression. When Tyler's comment reached her ears, she simply turned and smiled. "I accept," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Friday evening arrived with an air of anticipation. Golden Dragon had been transformed for Challenge Day. Extra seating lined the walls, a judge's table had been set up at the front, and a large mat covered the center of the training floor. Strings of paper lanterns cast a warm glow over the space, adding a theatrical touch to the proceedings. By 6 o'clock, the dojo was packed. Parents, siblings, and friends of students filled every available seat. To Erica's delight, a reporter from the local newspaper had arrived, camera in hand, ready to document the event for the community section. Rick moved through the crowd in his formal black GI, a red headband tied around his forehead, his signature look for demonstrations. His smile was confident, his handshake firm as he greeted parents and potential new students. "This is excellent publicity," Erica whispered as she passed him, tablet in hand. "I've already received 3 new membership inquiries, in the women's locker room." Thelma changed into her GI with methodical precision. She could hear the excited chatter from the main floor, the occasional burst of laughter or applause as preliminary matches took place. Mia entered, already dressed for her own match. "Ms. Gardner? Are you okay?" Thelma looked up with a serene smile. "Perfectly fine, dear. Just preparing myself. You know this is Erica's way of humiliating you, right? Rick is a 5th-degree black belt. He was state champion 3 years running. Was he now?" Thelma's tone was mild, almost amused. "How interesting." Mia hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You don't have to do this. You could say you're not feeling well, or I never run from a challenge, Mia." Thelma tied her white belt with practiced ease, especially one so graciously offered. The preliminary matches proceeded smoothly, students paired by rank and age, demonstrating their skills in light contact sparring and kata performances. Josh won his match against a boy from the intermediate class, his techniques solid, if uninspired. Tyler, to everyone's surprise, was eliminated early, after an overly aggressive attack left him vulnerable to a counter. Kenji Tanaka sat in the front row, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. Occasionally his eyes would meet Thelma's across the room, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Rick stepped to the center of the mat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special demonstration match tonight. As part of our commitment to inclusivity, we like to show that karate is for everyone, regardless of age or background." A murmur ran through the crowd as Thelma made her way to the mat, her white belt a stark contrast to Rick's black. "Ms. Gardner joined us recently and has shown great enthusiasm," Rick continued. "Tonight she'll demonstrate a kata from our intermediate curriculum, followed by a light sparring session with me." The crowd applauded politely, though several exchanged confused glances. Parents leaned toward each other, whispering behind their hands. "First, the kata," Rick announced. "This is Heian Sanden, typically taught to students at the brown belt level. I'll demonstrate first, then Ms. Gardner will attempt a simplified version." Rick moved to the center of the mat and performed the kata with precision and power, his movements sharp and dynamic. The crowd applauded appreciatively. Then it was Thelma's turn. She took her place at the center, assumed the starting position, and began. Her first few movements were hesitant, almost clumsy, exactly what everyone expected. A few snickers came from Tyler's corner of the room. Erica's smile was satisfied. Her phone raised to capture the moment. Then, something shifted. Midway through the kata, Thelma's posture straightened. Her movements became more fluid, more precise. Each technique flowed seamlessly into the next, her breathing deep and controlled, her focus absolute. The snickers died away. The dojo fell silent except for the whisper of Thelma's GI as she moved through the air with unexpected grace. By the final sequence, she was performing at a level that clearly surpassed Rick's demonstration. Her final stance was rock solid, her ki sharp and powerful, echoing through the stunned silence of the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then, hesitantly, applause began. Scattered at first, then growing as the audience processed what they had witnessed. Rick stood frozen, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Erica's phone had lowered, her mouth slightly open. In the front row, Kenji nodded almost imperceptibly, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. Rick cleared his throat. Well, that was unexpected. Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Let's move on to the sparring demonstration. They faced each other on the mat, bowed and assumed fighting stances. Rick's was textbook perfect, aggressive and forward-leaning. Thelma's was subtle, deceptively simple, her weight distributed evenly. Remember, this is light contact only, Rick said loud enough for the audience to hear. I'll adjust my level to make this a learning experience. Thelma simply nodded. At the signal to begin, Rick moved forward with a testing jab, clearly holding back. Thelma didn't move, didn't need to. The punch fell short by precisely 1 inch. Rick frowned and tried again, this time with a combination. Jab, cross, front kick. Thelma swayed slightly, each technique missing by the narrowest margin without her appearing to dodge. The audience leaned forward in their seats. This wasn't what they had expected. Rick's next attack was faster, less controlled. A roundhouse, kick followed by a reverse punch. Thelma finally moved, not backward, but forward, inside Rick's guard. She didn't strike. She simply occupied the space he needed, making his techniques collapse in on themselves. Frustration flashed across Rick's face. He launched a more aggressive combination, abandoning the pretense of a teaching exercise. Thelma remained calm, her defense impenetrable. She moved like mist around his techniques, always just beyond reach, never retreating. The match continued. For 2 full minutes, Rick growing increasingly disoriented by his inability to land a single technique. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breathing became labored, while Thelma remained composed, almost serene. Finally, Rick overextended on a lunging punch. In that moment of imbalance, Thelma moved. Her hand flashed out, a palm strike so soft it was barely visible, touching his wrist with surgical precision. Rick's hand opened involuntarily. His stance crumbled and he stumbled forward, catching himself just before falling. The dojo went completely silent. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Then Tyler's voice broke the spell. "That's bullshit," he shouted, standing up. "She got lucky." He stormed onto the mat. "Let me show you how it's done. I'm not going to hold back like Sensei did." Before Rick could intervene, Kenji rose from his seat and stepped forward. His voice, when he spoke, carried a quiet authority that silenced the room. "You will show respect," he said, each word precise and measured. "You stand in the presence of Thelma Gardner, 6-time All-Japan Women's Karate Champion and direct, student of Master Hidetaka Tanaka, my father." Rick's face drained of color as recognition dawned. "Thunderhand Gardner," he whispered, "the Tokyo legend." Erica pushed through the crowd, her face flushed with anger. "What is going on here? Rick, are you in on this? Is this some publicity stunt?" Rick shook his head slowly, still staring at Thelma with new eyes. "No, we've had a living legend in our dojo and I never saw it." Thelma stood quietly at the center of the storm, her posture now fully revealed as that of a master, straight-backed, dignified, powerful. Mia stepped forward, unable to contain herself any longer. I knew it. The book was right. You were famous. Josh approached more cautiously, studying Thelma with newfound respect. My dad's going to lose his mind when I tell him who you really are. Tyler remained defiant, though confusion had replaced some of his anger. If she's so great, why was she pretending to be a beginner? Why lie to everyone? Some questions deserve answers, Thelma said, her voice carrying through the dojo without effort. Others must be earned through respect. She turned to Kenji, who bowed deeply to her. Rick, after a moment's hesitation, followed suit. Around the room, students began to rise from their seats, bowing one by one. Even Josh, reluctantly, inclined his head in acknowledgement. As Thelma looked around at the faces turned toward her, some in awe, some in confusion, a few still in disbelief, she knew that her careful masquerade had ended. The storm had arrived, bringing with it winds of change that would sweep through Golden Dragon Karate Academy, transforming everyone in their path. The time for pretending was over. The aftermath of Challenge Day left Golden Dragon in chaos, and students lingered, buzzing with questions and excitement, while Erica frantically tried to maintain order. The local newspaper reporter scribbled notes furiously, already composing headlines in his mind. "Everyone, please!" Erica clapped her hands. "Thank you for attending. The demonstration is over. We'll see you at regular classes next week." As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, Rick approached Thelma, who stood quietly beside Kenji. The sensei's face was a storm of emotions, confusion, embarrassment, and a dawning respect. "My office," he said simply. "Now." Thelma nodded, following Rick to the back of the dojo. Erica hurried after them, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Kenji joined without invitation, his dignified presence making it impossible for anyone to object. The office was small, with motivational posters covering the walls and trophies lining a shelf behind the desk. Rick closed the door and turned to face Thelma. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "6 months you've been coming here pretending to be a beginner. Why?" Erica cut in before Thelma could respond. "Do you have any idea how this makes us look? Our reputation will only be enhanced," Kenji interrupted smoothly. "Your dojo has hosted one of the greatest living masters of traditional karate. Many would consider this an honor. An honor we didn't ask for," Erica snapped. "This deception undermines everything we've built." Thelma folded her hands in her lap, the picture of composure. "I understand your frustration. I didn't come here to disrupt your business or embarrass anyone." "Then why?" Rick pressed. "Why the charade?" Thelma exchanged a glance with Kenji before responding. "My full name is Thelma Gardner. My father was James Gardner, an American serviceman stationed in Okinawa. My mother was Mizuki Inoue, daughter of a local Aikido instructor." She paused, letting the information sink in. "I was born into two worlds, belonging fully to neither. In America, I was too Japanese. In Japan, I was too American, too black for both. But martial arts transcends those boundaries," Kenji added. Thelma's talent was undeniable, even to traditionalists who resisted teaching women, let alone foreigners. Rick leaned against his desk, his anger gradually giving way to curiosity. "The Tanaka clan, they accepted you?" "Not at first," Thelma admitted. "But my mother's family had connections. I trained in secret for years before being formally admitted to the school." "She became my father's prized student," Kenji said. "The first non-Japanese person to master our family's techniques, but not everyone celebrated her success." Erica checked her watch impatiently. "This history lesson is fascinating, but it doesn't explain why you infiltrated our dojo under false pretenses." "I didn't infiltrate anything," Thelma replied calmly. "I simply wanted to practice in a formal setting again. After decades away from dojos, I thought it best to observe first, to understand your teaching methods before revealing my background." "Decades away?" Rick asked. "The international circuit lost track of you after 1974. You just disappeared." A shadow passed over Thelma's face. "For good reason." Before she could elaborate, there was a knock at the door. Amanda poked her head in, looking flustered. "Sorry to interrupt, but you might want to see this." She held up her phone, displaying a social media page. A video was playing. Thelma performing an advanced kata in the park, her movements fluid and powerful. "It's going viral," Amanda said. "Someone named Mia uploaded it last night. It already has thousands of views." Erica snatched the phone, her expression darkening as she watched. "Damage control," she muttered. "We need immediate damage control." Rick looked at the video, then at Thelma. "That's not damage. That's beautiful." Outside in the main dojo area, most students had left, but Mia, Josh, and a few others remained, huddled together and speaking in excited whispers. "I can't believe I've been training with a legend," one of the younger students was saying. "My dad is going to freak out." "How did none of us see it?" another asked. "I mean, looking back, there were signs." Josh remained quiet, lost in thought. When his phone buzzed, he checked it and frowned. "It's my dad. He saw Mia's video and wants me to come home immediately." Mia touched his arm. "Are you okay? He sounded pretty intense last time you mentioned him." "I'll be fine," Josh said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "He's probably just shocked." As Josh left, Tyler approached the group, his earlier bravado replaced by sullen confusion. "This doesn't make any sense. If she's some champion, why slum it here with us? Why pretend to be bad?" "Maybe she had her reasons," Mia replied. "Not everything is about you, Tyler." Tyler's face flushed. "You've been Team Grandma from the start. I bet you knew about this." "I suspected," Mia admitted, "but I didn't know for sure until today." "Traitor," Tyler muttered, but there was less conviction in his voice than usual. That evening, Josh arrived, home to find his father waiting in the living room, laptop open on the coffee table. Alan Wilson was a broad-shouldered man with calloused hands and a perpetual scowl. The video of Thelma was paused on the screen. "Do you know who that is?" Alan demanded without preamble. Josh nodded. "Thelma Gardner. She trains at my dojo." "Thunderhand. Gardner," Alan corrected. "The woman who beat Hiroshi Kojima in '73, the only American to win at the Tanaka Invitational." His voice held a mixture of awe and bitterness. "I watched her fights when I was training. She moved like nothing I'd ever seen." He turned to Josh, his expression intense. "This woman has been at your dojo? Training with you?" "Well, not exactly," Josh admitted. "She was pretending to be a beginner. No one knew until today." Alan slammed his fist on the table. "And you didn't recognize greatness when it was right in front of you?" "I raised an idiot." Josh flinched at his father's outburst but stood his ground. "How could I know? She was hiding who she was." "A true martial artist sees beyond the surface," Alan growled. "I want you training with her, whatever it takes. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Dad, you don't think, that's the problem." Alan stood, towering over his son. "Fix it. Get close to her. Learn everything you can." Josh left his father's house with a knot in his stomach. The relationship with his father had always been complicated, but this new pressure felt different, more urgent, more desperate. Meanwhile, across town, Mia sat in her bedroom, watching the view count on her video climb. She hadn't expected it to spread so quickly, but once a few martial arts blogs had picked it up, it had exploded. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Hesitantly, she answered. "Is this Mia Lee?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Carmen Rodriguez from Black Belt Magazine. We're doing a feature on Thelma Gardner's return to the martial arts world. I understand you're her student?" Mia's eyes widened. Yes, I train at the same dojo, but..." "Perfect. We'd love to interview you about what it's like to train with a living legend." By morning, Golden Dragon was surrounded by reporters. Local news vans parked in the strip mall lot, and a steady stream of curious onlookers peered through the windows. Erica arrived early, immediately pulling the blinds and locking the door. "This is a nightmare," she muttered, checking her phone. "We've had over 300 messages since last night." Rick joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Actually, I think it's an opportunity. Do you know how many dojos would kill for this kind of publicity?" "Publicity we can't control," Erica snapped. "Our brand is about modern, accessible martial arts, not some ancient mystical nonsense." "Our brand," Rick repeated slowly. Should be about authentic martial arts, taught with integrity. Maybe we've lost sight of that. Before Erica could respond, there was a knock at the back door. Rick opened it to find Kenji standing there, impeccably dressed as always. We have a situation, Kenji said without preamble. Someone else is watching the dojo. Of course they are, Erica said. Every martial arts enthusiast in the state is watching us now. Kenji shook his head. Not enthusiasts. Someone dangerous. A man named Kojiro has connections in this country. His network has been tracking Thelma for years. Kojiro? Rick frowned. The fight promoter from the Tokyo Underground Circuit? The same, Kenji confirmed. Thelma's victory over his champion cost him millions in gambling losses. His reputation never recovered. That was 50 years ago, Erica protested. Surely he's moved on. Some wounds never heal, Kenji said gravely, especially those inflicted on pride and honor. Later that afternoon, Thelma arrived for her regular class to find the dojo transformed. Students who had previously ignored or mocked her now bowed deeply as she entered. Others approached tentatively, asking for autographs or photos. In the midst of the commotion, Tyler confronted Mia by the water fountain. His face was flushed with anger. Nice video, he said, his voice low. Guess you'll do anything for likes, even betray the dojo. Mia stood her ground. I didn't betray anyone. The truth was going to come out eventually. You're a traitor to the team, Tyler insisted, stepping closer. First you defend her, then you expose her online. What's your angle? Maybe I just recognize real talent when I see it, Mia shot back. And maybe you should grow up and stop acting like everything's a competition you need to win. Something in her tone, a new confidence perhaps, caught Tyler off guard. When she pushed past him, he didn't try to stop her. That evening, long after classes had ended, the dojo was silent and dark. A figure moved through the shadows, expertly picking the lock on the back door. Once inside, the intruder moved with purpose, overturning equipment racks and slashing practice mats with a knife. The destruction was methodical, almost ritualistic. When it was complete, the intruder spray-painted a single Japanese character on the wall-length mirror. Chi. Shame. Morning revealed the devastation. Rick stood amidst the wreckage, his face grim. Erica paced the floor, already on the phone with the insurance company. Students gathered outside, shocked by the vandalism. This is what your legend has brought us, Erica hissed at Rick. Destruction and chaos. This isn't about Thelma, Rick replied. It's about something much older and darker. Across town, Thelma knelt before a simple gravestone in the local cemetery. The name James Franklin Gardner was etched in the granite, along with the dates 1945-2005. She placed a small piece of black belt fabric at the base of the stone. They found me, James, she said softly. Just like you always said they would. She traced the letters of his name with her fingertips. You died protecting me from Kojiro's men. I won't let your sacrifice be in vain. A light footstep behind her made Thelma turn. Rick stood a respectful distance away, hands in his pockets. I'm sorry to intrude, he said. Kenji told me I might find you here. Thelma rose slowly, her knees protesting. My husband, she explained, gesturing to the grave. He was a Marine but also a martial artist. We met at a tournament in California after I left Japan. Rick stepped closer. The dojo was vandalized last night. I heard, Thelma said. I'm sorry to have brought this trouble to your door. That's actually why I'm here, Rick admitted. I wanted to apologize for how I treated you, for not seeing you for who you are. He hesitated, then added, and for not standing up when the students disrespected you. Thelma studied him thoughtfully. Apology accepted. But I sense there's more. Rick nodded. I want to learn from you. Not just techniques, but philosophy, approach. I've been teaching for 15 years, but last night I realized how little I actually know. From her bag, Thelma withdrew a small leather-bound book. My father-in-law's teachings, she said, offering it to Rick. "Perhaps this is a place to start." Rick accepted the book with reverence, bowing slightly. "Thank you, Sensei." The next morning, during open sparring at the dojo, a stranger entered. He was Japanese, perhaps 30, with close-cropped hair and intense eyes. He wore a plain black gi with no school insignia, and his white belt was clearly new, never washed. "I wish to challenge your highest-ranking fighter," he announced, his English precise but accented. Rick approached, extending his hand. "I'm Sensei Rick Walker. We don't typically allow drop-in challenges, but..." "Not you," the man interrupted, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Thelma, who had just emerged from the locker room. Her. A hush fell over the dojo as the stranger walked directly to Thelma and bowed, deeply but stiffly. "Thelma Gardner," he said. "I have waited a long time for this honor." Thelma studied him, her expression giving away nothing. But those closest to her noticed a subtle shift in her posture, a tensing of her shoulders. "What is your name?" she asked, though something in her eyes suggested she already knew. "Hiroshi," he replied. "Hiroshi Kojima." Thelma's whisper was barely audible. "Kojiro's son." The young man's eyes flashed with recognition before he turned and walked to the center of the mat, assuming a fighting stance that was distinctly different from the style taught at Golden Dragon. Thelma joined him on the mat, and for a moment, they simply regarded each other, 2 points in a constellation of fate that had been forming for decades. The dojo had fallen completely silent. Even those who didn't understand the significance of the name Kojima could feel the tension crackling. In the air, Rick moved to intervene, but Kenji placed a restraining hand on his arm. "This was inevitable," the older man murmured. "Some stories must reach their conclusion." Thelma and Hiroshi circled each other on the mat, neither rushing to engage. Their movements were measured, precise, 2 predators assessing each other's capabilities. Hiroshi struck first, a lightning-fast combination that would have overwhelmed most opponents. But Thelma moved with equal speed, deflecting and redirecting his attacks with minimal movement. No wasted energy, no flashy techniques, just perfect timing and positioning. The exchange lasted less than 10 seconds, yet contained dozens of techniques. When they separated, both remained untouched. "You honor your father's teaching," Thelma said quietly. Hiroshi's eyes narrowed. "Do not speak of him." They engaged again, more intensely this time. Hiroshi's style was aggressive, modern, a blend of traditional karate with elements of kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. Thelma's approach was purely classical, yet she adapted seamlessly to his hybrid attacks. Again, neither landed a decisive blow, though Hiroshi came close with a spinning back kick that Thelma evaded by a hair's breadth. The spectators watched, in awe. This was nothing like the point sparring they were accustomed to. This was combat as art, a dialogue of bodies that spoke of history and inherited pain. Hiroshi launched a final, furious assault, a combination so complex and fast that even Rick, a seasoned competitor, could barely follow it. Yet Thelma not only defended but countered at the perfect moment, slipping inside Hiroshi's guard to touch his chest with an open palm. She could have struck him. Everyone knew it. Instead, she simply made contact, a demonstration of control. That was more devastating than any blow. Hiroshi froze, his attack nullified. For a heartbeat, they remained locked in that position, her palm against his heart. Then he disengaged, bowed stiffly, and left without another word. As the door closed behind him, Thelma let out a long, measured breath. Kenji approached her, concern evident in his lined face. "That was Kojiro's son," he confirmed gravely. "He moves like his father, but with more restraint." "He found me," Thelma said softly. "After all these years?" "Not by accident," Kenji replied. "This is only the beginning." Later, in Rick's office, Kenji explained the situation more fully. Hiroshi was raised to take vengeance for his father's downfall. Kojiro blamed Thelma, not just for defeating his champion, but for exposing his match-fixing operation to the authorities. "That was 50 years ago," Rick protested. "Surely the statute of limitations—" "This isn't about legal justice," Thelma interrupted. "It's about a blood feud that spans generations. Hiroshi was raised on stories of my betrayal of his father's honor. But you didn't finish him today, Rick observed. You could have. Violence begets violence, Thelma said simply. I learned that lesson too late once before. I won't make the same mistake again. The next morning, Erica arrived early to find the lock on her office door jimmied open. Inside, she discovered that Thelma's registration forms had been removed from the file cabinet and her name deleted from the dojo management software. Problem solved, she muttered, carefully relocking the cabinet. Nothing connects her to us officially now. She didn't notice Rick watching from the doorway until he cleared his throat. What are you doing, Erica? She jumped, then composed herself. Damage control. If she's not officially registered here, we can distance ourselves from whatever vendetta she's involved in. Rick's expression hardened. So your solution is to erase her, after she brought more positive attention to this dojo than we've had in years. My solution is to protect our business, Erica snapped. This isn't about one person. It's about the 50 students who depend on us for training, the families who trust us. And what example are we setting for those students? Rick challenged. That we abandon people when things get difficult? That we value our brand over integrity? Don't be dramatic, I'm being practical. Rick crossed his arms. Restore her records, now, or I walk. Erica stared at him in disbelief. You'd throw away 15 years of partnership over someone you just met? I'd walk away from a business that's forgotten its purpose, Rick replied evenly. Your choice. While this confrontation unfolded, Josh was in the park at dawn, waiting anxiously on a bench. When Thelma appeared, walking slowly along the path, he approached her hesitantly. Ms. Gardner? Could I talk to you for a minute? Thelma smiled warmly. Of course, Josh. What's on your mind? He struggled to find the words, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. My dad, he's been pushing me my whole life. Nothing I do is ever good enough. The words came in a rush now. He wants me to win at any cost. When I lose a match, he makes me train until I can barely stand. Thelma listened quietly, her expression compassionate. I saw how you fought yesterday, Josh continued. You weren't trying to hurt that guy. You were just perfect. I want to understand how to do that. How to be strong without being cruel. Thelma studied him for a long moment. Meet me here tomorrow, 5 a.m. Wear comfortable clothes. No GI. The secret training began that week. Thelma, working with Josh in the early morning hours, teaching him not just techniques but principles. Balance, efficiency, mindfulness. The sessions were grueling but illuminating, focusing on internal development rather than external show. Power without purpose is just violence, Thelma explained as they practiced a subtle weight-shifting exercise. True strength comes from knowing when not to strike. At the dojo, tensions continued to rise. Tyler, still smarting from his early elimination at Challenge Day, publicly confronted Josh during a sparring session. Think you're special now because you're grandma's pet? He taunted. Let's see what you've got. The match that followed shocked everyone. Josh fought differently. Gone was the aggressive, showy style his father had drilled into him. Instead, he moved economically, calmly, using Tyler's own momentum against him. When it ended with Tyler on the mat, he looked up at Josh with a mixture of resentment and confusion. What the hell was that? He demanded. Since when do you fight like that? Josh offered his hand to help Tyler up. Since I started learning for myself instead of for someone else. Meanwhile, Mia had become something of an investigative journalist. Her initial video had led to connections with martial arts historians and former competitors who remembered Thelma from the 70s. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle. Kojiro wasn't just a fight promoter, she explained to Josh as they compared notes in the dojo lobby. He ran an entire underground network, illegal betting, fixed matches, even protection rackets for dojos in certain Tokyo districts. And Thelma exposed him? Not intentionally, Mia said. She was supposed to lose a match against his champion. When she won instead, the betting syndicate lost millions. Kojiro was disgraced. So now his son wants revenge, Josh concluded. But why wait 50 years? That's what I'm trying to figure out. According to my sources, Kojiro disappeared from the fight scene shortly after the scandal. Some say he went to prison, others think he fled to Korea. Well, someone's rebuilding his operation here, Josh said grimly. That Hiroshi guy wasn't just some random challenger. Their research was interrupted by an unusual sight, Tyler approaching them with none of his usual swagger. "Hey," he said awkwardly, "can I talk to you guys for a second?" Josh and Mia exchanged surprised glances but made room for him on the bench. "I saw something weird yesterday," Tyler began. "Erica was in her office with some guy I've never seen before. They were arguing about the tournament brackets, something about ensuring certain matchups." "She was rigging the tournament?" Mia asked, incredulous. Tyler nodded uncomfortably. "It's not the first time. She did the same thing before the regional competition last year." He paused, then added reluctantly, "And she knew about my supplements. Covered it up because she needed me to win." "The performance enhancers in your locker," Josh said, understanding dawning. "She knew?" "Yeah. Said it would be our secret as long as I kept bringing in trophies." Tyler stared at his hands. "I think I've been on the wrong side of this whole thing." The three students, once divided by rivalry, found themselves united by a common concern for their dojo's integrity. As the week progressed, the divide within Golden Dragon grew more pronounced. Some students, primarily those who had been with Erica the longest, maintained their distance from Thelma. Others, inspired by the viral video and the quiet dignity she displayed, began to seek her guidance after classes. Rick found himself increasingly torn between his business partnership with Erica and his growing respect for Thelma's approach to martial arts. The book she had given him, filled with philosophical insights and training methodologies he'd never encountered, had opened his eyes to how much he still had to learn. One evening, as he locked up the dojo, he found a note slipped under the door. Written in red ink, the message was simple but chilling. "One more loss, and this time it's not just your dojo that suffers." Rick showed the note to Thelma and Kenji the next morning. Neither seemed surprised. "Kojiro's tactics haven't changed," Kenji observed. "He always preferred intimidation to direct confrontation." "But what does it mean?" Rick asked. "What loss is he referring to?" Thelma's expression was grave. "The coming tournament. Hiroshi will be there, representing Kojiro's new organization. If he loses, especially to someone connected to me, then we withdraw," Rick suggested. "It's not worth the risk." "Running only delays the inevitable," Thelma said quietly. "Sometimes, to end a cycle of violence, you must stand your ground, not to fight, but to finally face the truth." As they spoke, across town, Hiroshi Kojima knelt before a small shrine in his apartment. On it sat a faded photograph of an older Japanese man in a business suit, his expression severe but proud. "I have found her, Father," Hiroshi murmured. "Soon, our family's honor will be restored." He rose and continued his preparation for the coming confrontation, a battle 50 years in the making, born from secrets and shame that had festered across oceans and generations. The reckoning was near. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as Thelma led a small group through the mist-covered park. Josh, Mia, and 3 other students from Golden Dragon followed her to a secluded clearing surrounded by ancient oak trees. Here, away from the politics and tensions of the dojo, Thelma had established a makeshift training space. "Begin with breath," she instructed, demonstrating a deep inhalation that expanded her diaphragm. "Power starts from within." The students mimicked her breathing pattern, then followed as she led them through warm-up exercises unlike anything they practiced at the dojo. These movements emphasized rootedness and fluidity, rather than speed or strength. "My father taught that the body is an instrument," Thelma explained, guiding Josh's arm into a more natural position, not to be forced, but to be tuned. As the session progressed, Mia noticed the profound difference between Thelma's teaching method and Rick's. Where he focused on technical perfection, she emphasized internal awareness. Where he demanded, she invited. The result was the same, improved technique, but the journey felt entirely different. After 2 hours of training, as the park began to fill with morning joggers, Thelma concluded the session. "Remember," she said, "what we practice here goes beyond physical movement. These principles apply to all aspects of life." As the students dispersed, Kenji approached from the path where he had been observing. His expression was grave as he handed Thelma a folded piece of paper. "A message from my brother in Japan," he said quietly. Thelma read it silently, her face revealing nothing. When she finished, she refolded the paper with careful precision. "Kojiro has placed a $50,000 bet on Hiroshi to defeat Thunderhand's Chosen," she told Kenji. "He's making this public in the underground fighting circuit." "He always did prefer to fight with money rather than honor," Kenji observed. "Will you tell the students?" Thelma watched Josh and Mia walking toward the park entrance, deep in conversation. "Not yet. They need to focus on their training, not on threats they cannot control." That afternoon, Thelma made her way to a part of town she had avoided for years, a warehouse district that had been revitalized with fighting gyms and training centers catering to MMA enthusiasts. Outside one such facility, a sleek building with tinted windows and the words "Kojima Elite Combat" emblazoned across the entrance, she paused. Through the glass, she could see Hiroshi leading a class of advanced students. His teaching style was precise, demanding, much like his father's had been. For a moment, Thelma simply observed, noting how the young man had incorporated elements of modern fighting systems while maintaining the core of traditional karate. As if sensing her presence, Hiroshi looked up. Their eyes met through the glass, and after a moment's hesitation, he excused himself from his class and stepped outside. "You should not be here," he said without preamble. "Yet here I am," Thelma replied calmly. "And here you are carrying on your father's legacy." Hiroshi's jaw tightened. "My father's legacy was stolen from him. By you." "Is that what he told you?" Thelma asked. "That I betrayed him? That I caused his downfall?" "You were his student. He trusted you, and you exposed his business to the authorities." Thelma shook her head slowly. "I was never Kojiro's student. I trained under the Tanaka family. Your father was a promoter who tried to fix my championship match. When I refused to lose, his gambling syndicate collapsed." "Lies," Hiroshi hissed, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "You fled Japan in disgrace." "I fled Japan in fear," Thelma corrected. "After your father's men attacked me and killed my training partner. The scar across my abdomen? That was your father's parting gift." Hiroshi's composure faltered momentarily before he reasserted control. "You left a world in chaos. The traditional ways died. The honor of true karate faded. Now it's all sport and spectacle." "And you believe revenge will restore what was lost?" Thelma asked gently. "I believe in setting right a historical wrong," Hiroshi replied. His tone softened slightly. "You could have ended me in the dojo that day. Why didn't you?" "Because violence only perpetuates itself," Thelma said. "Your father never understood that." Hiroshi considered her words for a long moment. "The tournament approaches. I will face whoever you send against me. After that—" He left the sentence unfinished, turning back toward his gym. "Hiroshi," Thelma called after him, "you are not your father. Remember that." Back at Golden Dragon, an unexpected development was unfolding. Tyler had cornered Josh near the locker room, but instead of his usual aggression, his demeanor was hesitant, almost apologetic. "I saw Erica with the tournament judge yesterday," he said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "She gave him an envelope, pretty sure it was cash." Josh frowned. "She's bribing officials now?" "Been doing it for years, apparently." Tyler ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know we're not friends, but this is messed up. The whole dojo is splitting apart, and I'm starting to think I'm on the wrong side." Josh studied him skeptically. "What brought on this sudden crisis of conscience?" "Finding out my coach has been lying to me for years," Tyler replied bitterly. "And watching you change. The way you fought last week, that wasn't your dad's style. That was something else, something real." After a moment's consideration, Josh extended his hand. Truce? Tyler hesitated, then shook it. Truce. For now. The next day brought another unexpected visitor to the dojo. Mia was leading a warm-up session when her parents entered, watching proudly from the sidelines. After class, they approached Thelma, who was assisting a young student with a kata. Mrs. Gardner, Mia's mother began. We wanted to thank you personally. Thelma looked up, surprised. For what exactly? For Mia, her father explained. She was being bullied at her previous school, nearly dropped out. Since finding martial arts, especially since training with you, she's become confident, focused. It's like having our daughter back. Your daughter has a natural talent, Thelma said warmly. And more importantly, a good heart. We saw the video, Mia's mother added. Your story is inspiring. Would you consider... That is, we'd be honored if you would join us for dinner sometime. As the conversation continued, Rick observed from his office, noting how naturally Thelma connected with the parents, how genuine her interest in their daughter seemed. It was a stark contrast to Erica's approach, which treated students primarily as revenue sources. The regional tournament arrived on a bright Saturday morning. Golden Dragon's team gathered early, excitement and tension palpable as they prepared. The venue, a convention center converted into a multi-ring competition space, buzzed with activity as teams from across the state set up their areas. Josh's first match was against a stocky competitor from a neighboring city's dojo. As he stepped onto the mat, he glanced toward the sidelines where Thelma stood, her presence calm and reassuring. She nodded once, and Josh felt a center of stillness form within him. The match began with his opponent launching an aggressive combination. Exactly the type of attack that would have drawn Josh into a power contest in the past. Instead, he remained centered, allowing the techniques to pass by with minimal deflection before countering with precise, economical movements. The victory came easily, almost effortlessly. As the referee raised Josh's hand, he caught sight of his father in the stands, watching with an unreadable expression. Tyler's match followed shortly after. His opponent was a previous rival who had defeated him the year before, a technically superior fighter who had exploited Tyler's aggression. This time, however, Tyler approached the match differently. Though he still fought with intensity, there was a new awareness in his movements, a consideration that had been missing before. When his opponent executed a spinning kick, Tyler saw an opening for a counter that would have been devastating and potentially injurious. Instead, he chose a safer technique, accepting a warning from the referee rather than harming his opponent. "Why'd you pull that punch?" Rick asked as Tyler returned to their team area. "You could have ended the match right there." Tyler glanced toward Thelma, who had observed the exchange with interest. "Didn't seem necessary," he replied. "There's winning, and then there's winning right." The tournament progressed through the day, with Golden Dragon students performing admirably across various divisions. Between matches, Kenji spotted Hiroshi, warming up in a separate area, surrounded by students from his own gym. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded venue, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. As the finals approached, Rick announced a surprise. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special demonstration scheduled before the championship matches. 2 masters will perform a traditional kata rarely seen outside Japan." Murmurs of interest spread through the crowd as Thelma and Kenji took the center mat. They bowed to each other, then to the audience, before assuming their starting positions. What followed left the audience spellbound. The dual kata, a choreographed sequence designed for 2 practitioners, showcased perfect synchronization between the elderly masters. Each movement flowed into the next with a harmony that spoke of decades of practice and mutual understanding. Though both were in their 70s, age seemed to fall away as they moved. Thelma's power and precision matched Kenji's, their techniques complementing each other in a display that transcended mere physical skill. When they finished, the convention center erupted in applause. Students from various dojos approached afterward, asking questions, seeking photos. For many, it was their first glimpse of traditional karate performed at its highest level. Amasaraitwa. The admirers was a local newspaper reporter who had been covering the tournament. "Ms. Gardner," he called. Would you say this marks your official return to the martial arts community? Before Thelma could respond, Erica pushed through the crowd. Ms. Gardner is not officially associated with Golden Dragon, she announced. She's here as a guest only. Rick, overhearing this, made a decision that had been building for weeks. In front of students, parents, and competitors from across the region, he confronted his business partner. That's not true, he said loudly. Thelma Gardner is an honored member of our dojo, and it's time everyone knew the truth about how we've been operating. In front of the stunned audience, Rick revealed Erica's tournament manipulations, her cover-up, of Tyler's supplement use, and her attempts to erase Thelma from the dojo's records. This ends today, he declared. Either we stand for something real, or we're just another business selling trophies and false confidence. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Parents murmured in concern, judges conferred urgently, and Erica, face flushed with humiliation, stormed out of the venue. As the chaos subsided, a new figure entered the competition area. Hiroshi Kojima, dressed in a formal black gi with his family's crest embroidered on the back, approached the officials' table. I wish to register for the open division, he announced. Then turning to face the crowd, he added, not as a guest, but as a challenger to Thelma Gardner herself. The tournament officials huddled together, clearly uncomfortable with this unexpected development. The head judge, a veteran martial artist in his 60s, approached Thelma. This is highly irregular, he said. You're not registered as a competitor, and frankly, exhibition matches between masters aren't covered by our insurance. Thelma nodded her understanding. Yet some debts can't wait, she replied, her eyes fixed on Hiroshi. I request that the match be allowed. After further consultation, the officials reluctantly agreed to a special demonstration match between Thelma and Hiroshi. Word spread quickly, and spectators who had been leaving returned to their seats. Even competitors from other divisions gathered around the center mat, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. As Thelma prepared, removing her warm-up jacket to reveal her GI with its worn black belt, Josh approached her. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. This is his vendetta, not yours. Thelma smiled gently. Some cycles can only be broken face-to-face, Josh. Remember that. She stepped onto the mat where Hiroshi waited, his posture perfect, his eyes intense. They bowed to each other with formal precision, then assumed fighting stances that reflected their respective lineages, his more modern and aggressive, hers classical and centered. The head judge signaled the start of the match, and the crowd fell silent. What followed was not merely a fight but a conversation through movement, a physical dialogue about history, honor, and the passing of time. Hiroshi attacked with combinations that blended traditional karate with modern fighting systems, his techniques precise and powerful. Thelma responded with movements that seemed to flow like water around stone, neither retreating nor directly opposing his force. Look at her footwork, one coach whispered to his students. She's never out of position. And her timing, another added. She's reading him like a book. The match intensified, Hiroshi growing more determined with each exchange. A spinning kick nearly caught Thelma's head, forcing her to duck at the last moment. The crowd gasped, but she maintained her composure, countering with a technique that almost, but not quite, connected with his ribs. They separated, circling each other, both breathing hard now. Sweat glistened on Hiroshi's brow, while Thelma's movements had slowed slightly. She was, after all, 50 years his senior. Then, midway through an exchange, Thelma's shoulders suddenly gave way. A grimace of pain crossed her face as her right arm dropped momentarily. Hiroshi, seeing the opening, launched a powerful combination aimed at her vulnerable side. Instead of retreating, Thelma employed a breathing technique, a method taught by her father-in-law decades ago. Her focus narrowed, excluding the pain, and she redirected Hiroshi's attack with her left hand while stabilizing her injured shoulder. The crowd watched in amazement as this elderly woman continued to face her younger, stronger opponent despite her injury. There was no surrender in her eyes, only determination and a deep, centered calm. My father said you brought shame to our family, Hiroshi called out during a brief pause in the action, That you destroyed everything he built. Your father built. An empire on deception, Thelma replied, her voice carrying across the now silent venue. He fixed fights, threatened dojos, corrupted the art we both love. He gave his life to martial arts. Hiroshi's next attack was fueled by emotion, making it powerful but predictable. No, Thelma countered, slipping inside his guard. He used martial arts to serve his ambition. There's a difference. Their exchange continued, each technique carrying the weight of history. Hiroshi's frustration grew as Thelma continued to thwart his attacks, not through superior strength or speed, but through deeper understanding. You could have killed him after the scandal, Hiroshi said, his voice lower now, almost questioning. Why didn't you? Because mercy is harder than violence, Thelma responded. Compassion requires more courage than revenge. In the final sequence of their match, Hiroshi committed fully to a powerful striking combination. Thelma, rather than evading, stepped directly into his attack. Her movement was so unexpected that it disrupted his timing completely. With surgical precision, she disarmed his technique and placed her palm directly over his heart. Time seemed to freeze. Everyone present knew what had just happened. Thelma had won, not by defeating Hiroshi, but by demonstrating that she could have. Her hand rested lightly on his chest, directly over his heart, in a gesture that could have been lethal, but was instead a moment of connection. Hiroshi's eyes widened with the realization. His arms lowered slowly, and then, to the astonishment of the crowd, he dropped to his knees, head bowed. I have lived with my father's hatred for so long, he said, his voice barely audible. I don't know how to exist without it. Thelma placed her hand gently on his shoulder. That's your next journey, she said, and it may be the hardest fight of all. The convention center remained silent for several heartbeats, the audience collectively holding their breath as they witnessed the resolution of a conflict that had spanned continents and generations. Then, one by one, people began to stand. Josh was first, bowing deeply to Thelma. Mia followed, then Tyler. Rick joined them, and soon the entire Golden Dragon team was on their feet, showing respect not just to Thelma's victory, but to the spirit with which she had achieved it. Even Kenji, who rarely displayed emotion, wiped a tear from his eye as he bowed to his father's most accomplished student. In the weeks that followed, change swept through Golden Dragon. Rick bought out Erica's share of the business, restructuring the dojo with a renewed emphasis on traditional values alongside modern training methods. The tournament scandal led to an investigation that ultimately implicated several officials and coaches in match-fixing schemes reminiscent of Kojiro's old operation. Mia's online sleuthing, combined with information provided by Kenji through his connections in Japan, helped authorities build a case against the remnants of Kojiro's network. The empire that had taken decades to rebuild crumbled in a matter of weeks as key figures were arrested and assets frozen. Hiroshi, after a period of reflection, returned to Golden Dragon, not as an enemy, but as a guest instructor. His knowledge of modern fighting systems complemented Thelma's traditional approach, offering students a more comprehensive education. 1 month after the tournament, the community gathered for a special ceremony. The sign above the dojo had been changed to read Gardner Tanaka Karate Academy, honoring both the American pioneer and the Japanese tradition that had shaped her. Thelma, dressed in a formal gi with her original black belt, now frayed with age but radiating history, stood before the assembled students and families. Rick, wearing a white belt despite his years of experience, knelt before her. In the tradition of the Tanaka school, Thelma announced, we recognize that true learning begins with emptying one's cup. Sensei Rick has chosen to begin again as a student of our combined traditions. She turned to the rows of students, Josh and Mia in the front, Tyler nearby, new faces interspersed with familiar ones. This dojo will honor both innovation and tradition, strength and compassion, discipline and joy. A young girl, no more than 6 years old, raised her hand. Sensei Thelma, will you teach us to be as strong as you? Thelma smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening. Strength comes in many forms. The most important is here. She placed her hand over her heart. This is where the true fight begins, not against others, but for who you want to be. As the ceremony concluded and students broke into groups for their first lessons under the new regime, Thelma looked around at what she had helped create. From ridicule to respect, from isolation to community, her journey had come full circle. She began the children's class with a simple instruction: breathe, center, begin. The same words her father had taught her decades ago, now passing to a new generation. The dojo filled with the sound of bare feet on polished wood, of focused, ki and concentrated breathing. Outside, the sun cast long shadows through the windows, highlighting the path of those who had come before and illuminating the way for those just starting their journey. Thelma Gardner, once hidden, now stood, fully in the light, teacher, pioneer, and living bridge between worlds. Her fight was not over. It had simply transformed into something greater than herself. This, she knew, was her final and most important lesson: that the true victory is not in conquering others, but in creating a legacy that outlives you. What would you fight harder to protect, your pride, or your potential to change someone else's life? If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share to experience more journeys of hidden strength and unexpected redemption.